Hi, it's Emily Pritt, and I'm here with Mark Paradies and Marcus Miller, and we're going to talk about why people get FDA letters.
Very good. And what we can do to prevent them, right?
Right. We don't want to get FDA letter, right?
Yeah. So I think maybe starting off with, what triggers FDA letters? What happened? Like, how do they come?
And it's really FDA letters is the food side or the drug side, and it usually has to do with adulterated or mislabeled products that they come and do an inspection because you've had some kind of problem, and they find that you don't have a good quality program or a good food safety program, and that's why these food or these drugs are mislabeled, or it could be adulterated. You want to prevent the bad things from happening. The bad things are somebody getting sick from eating food that you produced, or somebody taking a drug and it's mislabeled and they have a reaction to it, or they actually die because of it, or your drug doesn't do what it's supposed to do. In other words, the ingredients have degraded. Maybe it's past the due date when you should have taken that drug off the shelf or produced it, and now it isn't effective anymore. Right. So there's lots of different reasons why the FDA can come and look at your facility or send you a letter that says this is what's wrong and you need to fix it. And for us, the thing I always think about is that their root cause analysis wasn't good to prevent these kinds of problems.
Right, and I know they do routine inspections as well, and I think that's where if you have a very good preventative auditing culture, then as they come in for the inspections, they're not going to have the findings that are going to lead to the warning letters.
So you can look at this reactively or proactively. The reactive side is you've had some problem, something didn't meet quality specs, and you go in and do an investigation and you tell the FDA what you're doing to fix it. And I think the thing that they hate the worst, or one of the things, is that somebody says, well, the root cause of that was human error. It was just human error, so what are we going to do? We're going to retrain them. Yeah. And that's just a red flag, if you will, for the FDA, because they think you're not getting to the roots of the problems.
Or you're just going to change policy or update standard operating procedures to make people be more careful or to teach them how to do it better. But you can't just say it and do it and expect everybody to be able to just get on board.
If you do that, the next thing they're going to do is have a follow-up inspection, right. And then they're going to see that you didn't fix the problem.
Then you're going to get a letter that says your root cause analysis is inadequate, and you're going to have to go back and show them, okay, what are we doing differently now that we actually are fixing the problems?
And you're going to have to be able to prove it. You're going to have to be able to defend your findings, right? So as you look into some of the findings the FDA presents to you, like, here's your problems, well, the taproot process will help make sure that they're confident that you investigated it well, that you have defendable root causes because you took it through an evidence-based methodology, and that your CAPAs are addressing the real root, the underlying causes of those issues. It just gives them confidence, and if they're confident that you did what you're supposed to do, then you can move on and not have to deal with some of the really bad things that could happen if they deem that you weren't very good at fixing things.
Well, we talk about a lot of acronyms, so most people know what FDA is, but CAPA?
Corrective actions, preventative actions. When they do have a finding, you've got to fix that specific finding, right? You've got to fix it. But you also have to look at, okay, where's our risk in other places in the company? You have to do a systematic review, right? In root cause analysis and taproot, call it generic findings, right? Where else do we have this risk? We need to go out and look to see if these root causes exist anywhere else. And then, in addition to that, you're going to have to say, okay, well, now we do a preventative action so we can mitigate the risk of any similar type of issues happening in our other systems.
So that answers why people get the letters and a little bit more into what we can do to prevent it. But I know you guys have a lot more to say than just that.
No, we've talked about the reactive side, but you did mention audits. And so you can react to problems you've had and do good root cause analysis on that, and the FDA will think, okay, they're fixing their problems. But you can get better than that in that you can go out and audit your own facility, not the FDA audit your facility. You can find problems and fix the root causes of those problems, of the problems you identify in the audit. And in that way, you're stopping the problems from ever happening. And so you're way ahead of the game. If you're good at doing proactive improvement, you'll you still probably have inspections, but they'll go a lot better, and you won't have any of the negative things coming in that you have to fix.
Yeah.
I mean, every investigation you do like that, every poor audit finding, when you take it through Taproot, you're going to be able to find those underlying root causes. You're going to fix those system weaknesses, and every single investigation is going to lead to continuous improvement, like you're saying. So when the FDA does walk in and they do, their inspection, you're ready.
And almost all of the problems you identify, I won't say all, but a large majority of them are human error, human performance kind of problems. And that's why Taproot is such a good tool to use on these FDA inspection findings, on your findings when you have something happen reactive, on your audit findings, because it's very good at finding the root causes of human performance problems, not just stopping at human error, but finding out what is causing those human errors to occur. And as Marcus said, the generic problems behind that, to go get the systemic things that are causing those root causes to be there in your system in the first place. And so you can find both the root cause and fix it, and the systemic cause and fix that, and really prevent future incidents or audit findings.
Yeah, I really think if we do it right, you're improving your systems with every investigation, and that's a benefit to your people, right? It makes their job easier to do correctly. It's reducing risk as they go through their day and they do their work. They know what they need to do. They have their priorities, and they don't take unnecessary risks just to get the job done, right?
And what you want to avoid is the negative. You want to avoid the FDA letter, but you really want to avoid the negative publicity that comes along with somebody saying, well, either that you've had a food safety problem and you've made people sick, or you've had a drug problem and the FDA is maybe shutting down your facility. Maybe you're trying to figure out why these things happen and you've got to do a big recall. And the PR from one of those kinds of things is horrible. And it takes you years to recover from that bad PR of having an incident that you could have prevented. And that's just, for upper level management, it's a really bad day when the nightly news is covering something that happened to your facility.
Well, and if the FDA takes administrative actions, you really can't get clear of that until they come in and relook at it, investigate, do another inspection, and that could take up to 2 years. So if you're a drug company out of the UK and they find findings against you, and you have to wait for 2 years before you have to ship your drugs back to the US, I mean that's hugely debilitating, right, to a company?
How long did it take for Bluebell to get back in production after they actually had criminal proceedings after theirs? Mm-hmm. But which you obviously want to avoid. No CEO wants to be in court and have a jail sentence hanging over his head. But it just is one of those, you really want to fix problems, and almost all these problems, before they became big issues, they had precursor incidents that they could have investigated and could have fixed the problems and could have prevented the big accident or the big contamination or the FDA shutting down their facility or whatever. They could have done it with small ones if they would have learned from them.
So why do you think they don't? Like, it's easy to sit here and say, this is how it should be, but what do you think gets in the way of them not having that type of culture?
I think a lot of those little things that go under the radar, they get missed. It's only until they have an inspection and then you kind of like peel back the onion and realize this is a big mess. If they're not taking that proactive approach to stop the little things, because if I was an investigator, I come in and I see like all this stuff is already a mess, that one little section I've peeled back you can only imagine what the rest of it's going to look like.
And I think that's what they assume. They assume if you don't address these findings they come up with, that, hey, it's not just here in this specific finding, it's everywhere. Now you have to prove we don't have problems everywhere. Or you go out and look and you find we do have problems everywhere, and now we got to fix everything instead of this one finding that we found.
I think there are some places where it really is an issue of they're trying to skirt the rules and regulations, but I think those are a minority, very few. I think mainly it's people don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And they in MBA courses, they don't teach you about human error. They don't teach you how to fix these problems. And so sometimes managers just believe, well, they're going to try harder, we're going to train them better, and these problems will go away. And if they do something like 5 whys, they can't get past their current knowledge, and so they don't know the causes of these human errors, so they can't find them and fix them. And so I think that's why Taproot is such an eye-opener. Some places, almost every place where people start to implement it, they go, wow, I didn't see these problems before. They've been here. We've done the standard corrective actions. Usually training is one of those. And they kept happening. And I told people to try harder. I told people to be more careful. And they still made mistakes. And they can't understand why that's happening.
Everybody gets frustrated because it's like, we've dealt with this already.
It becomes
why are
a
we
blame
still having
culture.
This problem?
It becomes a blame culture or a crisis management culture, and you end up blaming your employees, and they don't know why they're making mistakes. They know they're making mistakes, and a lot of times they'll say, well, I'm going to try harder. They will take responsibility and say, I just should have been more careful. But that's not the point. The point is there's reasons mistakes are occurring, and if you don't fix those reasons, they're going to happen again. And so I think part of why it happens is because people just don't know.
Right. And to me, I think that comes from the top too. I think it's extremely important for upper management, even the CEO, to understand that concept that, hey, people are out there trying as hard as they can, but if we don't set up the systems to help them succeed and continue to monitor those systems so we can ensure that they're working and they're working for our employees so they are more confident, they're not making mistakes, it's got to come from the top.
Well, that's why we have the CEO or senior management course to let senior management know, here's what Taproot is, here's what it'll help people find, and here's what you should be expecting. So they expect a lot better than we're just going to retrain them.
Yeah, that's right. They're the ones where the buck's going to stop, right? So it's in their best interest to understand what they should be doing to help their employees succeed. Not just policing them, right? But to say, okay, this is important to our culture. Every time there's a mistake or every time there's a poor audit finding, this is what we expect, right? Give them a process. We all know, we're human performance experts. We know when people have processes to follow, they're more confident. And if they're more confident, they're going to perform better. So coming from the top, saying, hey, here's the way we operate. Here's the way we continuously improve our systems to help you do better.
Why it's important.
That's such a better culture, right? Than just getting caught doing something wrong and then retraining people? Isn't that a form of punishment?
Because if you focus on the rules and this has to be done this way, it kind of makes me think of parenting, but this is why we do it.
Like
because I said so.
Right, but there's more to it. There's an importance on certain things for a reason that maybe that employee doesn't realize the significance of it, just thinks you're being extra meticulous over one little thing, but there's a reason why. There's a regulation behind it. So taking the time to explain all that, getting the buy-in, and having a culture that cares about that kind of stuff does make a huge difference.
I just remember a plant I was at down south, and down further south than Tennessee, and we were doing courses, and the operations manager was doing the intro for each of the courses. So we were training, I think it was like 700 people in a 4-hour course. This was their general employee training. And he'd start off every every introduction to our course with, okay, we've been doing this wrong in the past. We've been blaming people. It wasn't the right way to do things, and we've learned, and we're going to do it differently. So that's why I'm here to introduce this course, because I want these people to tell you what we're going to be doing so you can understand it, and so that you can fully participate in these future investigations and know that it's not there to blame you. It's there to find systemic causes, root causes that we can fix and keep these incidents from happening again. And he gave a really good introduction, but at the end he'd always say, does anybody have any questions? And this lady stood up and she said, well, I got something to say. And she says, last week I was told they were going to taproot me. And she said, that sounded bad. It sounded like a root canal. I thought I was going to lose my job because I had made a mistake that cost over $100,000. And I was pretty sure I was going to get fired. And they brought me in and we did this investigation and we got all the facts down on a chart. And then they dug in and they found why I made those mistakes. And I found out that it wasn't just me. Anybody else could have made those same kind of mistakes. And so this could have happened to anybody. And we found ways to fix those problems. And now it's not going to happen to anybody. So I want to tell everybody here, this taproot is a really good thing, and if you ever have to participate in one, you don't have to be afraid. You should just go in and participate, and they'll find root causes and they'll fix them. And I thought that was like one of the perfect
intros.
Well, yeah, because what can you do better than have somebody who's been through it, didn't know what was going to happen, and came away with a positive reaction. I guess
how good is that for the investigators themselves? Like, when they do an investigation and you have somebody that's saying that hey, when we get through this on the other side, things are going to be better for us.
Yep.
Like, how much better evidence are you able to collect when people share?
I've got one more quick story then, because you just brought it up. So we were teaching a course at another plant, and they had picket signs, and they were picketing at the gate. Oh. And I'm like, oh, we got to go in, we got to teach a course, they're having some kind of strike, this is really bad, should we, I guess we just got to drive through, they're letting cars through. So I'm driving, and I go through, and they're handing out leaflets to all the cars going through. And so I take it, and I hand it to the other instructor who's sitting in the front seat, and I'm driving along, and she says, you got to pull off. I said, why? She said, I got to tell you what this thing says. And I said, okay. So we pull off, and she said, the reason they're picketing out there is because they had an incident yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, and they fired somebody. They fired somebody, and they hadn't done a taproot investigation, and the union is demanding they do a taproot investigation to find the root causes, because they don't think it's their union member who is at fault. They think there's systemic causes that caused this. Oh, wow. And they want management to do a taproot investigation. And I thought, well, this is sort of good and sort of bad. Oh. It's good that the union wants this, but they probably should have done an investigation before they fired the person. Mm-hmm. And it was just one of those. It turned out the union was one of the biggest supporters of doing taproot, because they realized it wasn't a blame-oriented system. It really fixed problems and made the work better for their union members.
Yeah, it's transparent.
Yep.
Right? So building a snap chart, finding the problems that need to fix, the causal factors, getting all that documented, and then going through the root cause tree and dictionary with those problems and finding your root cause, it's all defensible. There's no room for error or doubt or blame or bias. So regulatory agencies like the FDA loves to see it, right? Unions love to see it. Your HR department should love to see it. So even if it does lead to discipline, if you find out it's this one person, nobody else is doing it, you've done everything as a company to help them do it right, and they still chose to do it wrong, well, then you have all that proof, all that documentation that, hey, as a company, we're doing everything we can. This is a one-off, it's one person, here's your discipline. Nobody's surprised, including the person getting the discipline. Yeah. So how do unions not love that? How do regulatory agencies not love that?
I've got one comment on that. Usually, if it's one bad person, by the time you have an incident, they really should have taken action before that. The incident investigation should have been the indicator of the one bad person. And if you ask that person's supervisor, they probably knew about these problems long before the incident occurred.
Or the risk, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that sort of sums up the risk they face. The big risks are people getting sick or maybe even dying from adulterated food or bad drugs. And the way you fix that is by either A, reactively investigating precursor incidents that were small incidents, and when you find the causes of them, you could prevent the big incidents. B, FDA is going to come in and do an investigation, and you're going to have to address their findings, and you want to find the root causes of those. Or C, you get to be good to where you're doing your own audits. You find things before things ever get bad. You catch things in there in the very beginning when something's starting to go wrong, rather than wait a long time. And you prevent precursor incidents and FDA findings from happening. And in doing that, it's better for your employees. It's obviously better for your senior management. They don't get any bad phone calls or bad press. And really the regulator's happy. They don't want to come in and have findings. They don't want to have bad press, because it's bad for the whole industry. So I think that's to sort of sum it up. That's what we think.
Yeah. And I know Taproot also, I know we talked about the investigation and the root causes, but especially now with our software and tracking corrective actions, I mean, you have to be able to put effective corrective actions in place for that incident and for any systemic issues you find. But now with the software, you can track and prove that, one, we implemented it like it was supposed to be implemented, that our systems have changed. Now we're operating under new systems. Somebody can go out and verify that's true. But just because we verify it's true, we may not have fixed the mistakes or the problems that we found in the investigation, right? So now, put a validation step in place, and we can track that in the software. So maybe Mark goes out a month later, does job observations, does audits. Those mistakes that we saw during our inspection, are they still happening? And if they're not still happening, great, we got documented proof that our corrective actions were effective. FDA loves it. But if they are still happening, we have time to fix our corrective actions before another incident tells us, hey, you got your corrective action wrong.
And you're not pulling a corrective action out of thin air. There's also a guide to help you get to the answers.
And remember, you have to train people, you have to implement it, you have to check that it's being done. The corrective action makes you take all those steps as you're putting together your CAPA. So when the FDA reviews it, they don't say, oh, well, you got it wrong. I don't see any training documents that show that you've put this in place the right way.
Yep. So the next step from all of this is to get into a course. That would be, I guess, my first step for somebody who's new to this, first time hearing about all this. So on our website, taproot.com, you can click on courses and find a course in your area. We also have where we can come to your site and you can reach out to us, contact us using the contact form or our phone number that's listed on our website at taproot.com. For our viewers that are watching or listening, we hope you join us again next time for another Taproot Root Cause Analysis podcast. There's links below to show about all the things we talked about today, and we'll see you next time.